Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking apart a really fascinating subject together. We're gonna literally deconstruct the toxic illusions of what it actually takes to possess a true champion's mindset. You know, when we look at the absolute best in the world, we often just imagine them as these flawless, unstoppable machines. But as we'll discover today, the reality is far more complex and honestly, deeply human. Okay, let's dive right into this, because this quote from multi-time Mr. Olympia Chris Bumstead instantly sets the stakes. He asks, if you're trying to beat everybody else on the planet, what are you prepared to sacrifice? When you are aiming to be the undisputed number one at anything, you aren't just competing with other people, you are essentially negotiating a ruthless transaction with your own life. It forces this fundamental reckoning about what you are truly willing to give up to reach that peak. So I want you to honestly ask yourself that right now. When you look at your own big ambitions, what are you willing to put on the chopping block? Because extreme, world-class success carries massive, often totally hidden costs. It's not just about, skipping a few parties or setting your alarm a bit earlier. It requires a profound, fundamental sacrifice of the very things that most people consider absolutely essential for a happy life. To really grasp the stark reality of extreme performance, we need to look at what happens when you push those sacrifices to the absolute limit. Think about the story of Eddie Hall winning World's Strongest Man. It was later revealed that the toll of pushing his body to those unimaginable extremes meant his marriage was actively breaking down, his time with his kids was basically non-existent, and he frankly believed that if he hadn't won that year, the physical strain might have literally cost him his life. That is the deadly, real-world price tag of trying to beat everyone else on the planet. And this whole idea brilliantly illustrates the huge dividing line between how we think champions operate and how they actually survive. We have this toxic expectation in society that champions never feel fear, right? And that leads to this fake bravado where competitors loudly declare they're going to win just to mask their own internal terror. But true, sustainable confidence is entirely different. It's about looking at your lingering doubts, acknowledging you might actually fail, and stepping up to the plate anyway. Because let's be real, unwavering, fearless confidence, it's kind of a lie. Even the absolute best in the world struggle with crippling doubt. Chris Bumstead admits he goes into massive competitions full of lingering anxiety. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's simply being truthful with yourself about those fears rather than building this fragile fake facade that just shatters the second you're under pressure. So how does a champion actually process all that anxiety? Well, Chris has a highly actionable method. First, he catches the fear instead of trying to numb it. Then, and this is the real game changer, instead of just logically mansplaining the fear away in his own head, which honestly just pushes the stress down deeper, he vocalizes it out loud. He shares it with his wife, his trusted partner. By putting it out into the world and allowing her to regulate and validate those feelings, that suffocating anxiety actually diffuses. Now let's look at how this builds into a much bigger concept regarding our overall emotional capacity. Imagine your emotions on a wide spectrum. A lot of high achievers, and honestly a lot of us in general, try to live in that narrow, numbed-out, safe zone right in the middle of the spectrum just to avoid the pain of failure or anxiety. But by creating a floor to avoid the lows, you inadvertently build yourself a glass ceiling of joy. It's exactly like Chris learned from his therapist. If you numb the bad, you inherently numb the good. You have to be willing to expand your emotional range. Fear, sadness, and stress are not just bad emotions that need to be suppressed. They're actually necessary tools for expanding your human experience. Embracing those terrible lows is exactly what builds your heart's capacity to eventually feel the most ecstatic highs. Section 1. Winning the boring victories. All right, to actually sustain intense success over time without completely burning out, we have to look at these boring victories. Think about your own day for a second. How do you handle mundane frustrations? Because the foundation of a true champion isn't built under the bright stage lights. It's built in these unsung private victories. It's keeping your cool when bad traffic makes you super late. It's pushing through a workout when you are absolutely dragging your feet, or resisting the urge to snap at a barista when your whole morning has just gone wrong. Now, what's really interesting here is the concept of a well-done list. We are all so relentlessly focused on our to-do lists, but we rarely ever give ourselves applause for simply navigating a tough, annoying Tuesday with grace. No one is going to hand you a shiny trophy for not losing your temper for sure, but acknowledging these unglamorous, mundane wins on a daily basis is exactly how you build unshakable character. But even as you build up that character, success brings its own really heavy burden. We always hear the phrase, pressure is a privilege, right? But Chris actually reverses it. He says, privilege is a pressure. When you are given incredible opportunities, health, and a massive platform, there is this ambient, lingering anxiety that you are just not doing enough. High achievers are so often driven by this unconscious assumption that unless they are constantly producing great things, they simply aren't enough. Section 2. The ultimate accountability, fatherhood. So when the pursuit of greatness starts to, frankly, eat you alive, you need a grounding metric. Chris describes parenting as a Navy SEAL hell week that just never stops. And why is that? Because children eventually see right through your facade. You can put on this amazing show for social media or the public, but at home, there are essentially cameras on you 24/7. You can't hide your flaws, your passive aggressiveness, or your ego from your kids. It forces you to actually fix your underlying problems because you are actively modeling who they will become. The truth is, the anxiety of performance and the intense pressures of life, they remain part of the human experience. But having deep relational anchors fundamentally shifts how we process them. Chris talks about the pure, indescribable love of just having his daughter fall asleep on his chest. And in that tiny moment, all the superficial stress of global competition just completely washes away. The fears don't magically vanish, but anchored by that profound love, they simply lose their power to linger. Section 3. Redefining true success. So the crucial point we're getting to here is it really all comes down to what tips the scales for you, extrinsic goals or intrinsic goals. Extrinsic goals like the trophies, the public validation, that desperate need to just beat everyone else, they are incredibly fleeting. They leave you empty the very moment you achieve them, always demanding more. But intrinsic goals, maintaining your authenticity, protecting your mental peace, and striving to just be your absolute best self, those are completely within your control, and they provide an enduring sense of fulfillment. And this leads perfectly into what we can call the grand kid test. Fast forward a bit and imagine you are older, bouncing a grand kid on your knee. They look up at the mantle. Objectively, they don't care if you have 5, 6, or 7 world titles sitting up there. Those outcomes are kind of arbitrary to them. What they actually care about is the person behind all those trophies. How do you actually show up in their life every single day? Because the achievement itself, it's really just a false peak. Sure, it gives you a direction to climb, but the moment you get to the top, you realize there's always just another mountain waiting. The true value isn't the gold medal. It's discovering what you are genuinely capable of when you are starving, tired, and completely doubting yourself, but you make the choice to push forward anyway. The journey is what actually builds your character. And that leaves us with the absolute most important question of all. Look at your own daily grind right now, your stresses, your ambitions. Are you defining your success merely by the literal or metaphorical trophies and validation you collect? Or are you defining it by the strength, authenticity, and emotional depth of the person you are becoming in the pursuit of those goals? Really think about that as you tackle whatever your next challenge is. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.